morning. So I think quite a lot of what's been said in the session today could be interpreted as a crisis of text. Text is in crisis. There's a lot of text, different interpretations of text, and we're seeing machine learning algorithms now generating text and fooling us as to what is real and what is genuine. So I'm going to talk about the crisis in scholarly text and how we may solve it with some of the ideas that Frida mentioned earlier, which is about self-describing documents. So I'd say there's this crisis both in scholarly publishing and in the public understanding of science, and I think they have common roots or causes to them in that the research process involves writing up your research, submitting it to a journal, it goes through peer review, it takes a long time, finally gets published, and then that you're publishing to an audience of experts. When your research is communicated to the media, it's interpreted, sometimes misinterpreted, and then eventually the public get to hear about it and they latch on to certain things, and they might be told things like, oh, you know, the Wakefield study says that vaccines cause autism. Hundreds of other studies say no, it doesn't, but people don't hear that message, they only hear the original message of what's being reported. And the problem is they don't have access to the original research. They don't have access to the papers, and even if they do, they're written in a language that they don't understand. And so I'd say these are two connected. And there's no easy way for people to check the veracity of findings or claims in the literature for both experts and the lay reader. So the question is, how do we fix this? And can we fix this without requiring authors to ditch their existing tools? There are solutions to this problem where people say, well, let's have authors writing their stuff directly to the web, communicate directly to the web, write it in a way that people can annotate, read and share and verify, which is great, but in practice people don't do that. A recent study on the preprint server called BioArchive, which is a really successful preprint server where people upload their early stage research just after it's been completed, prior to peer review, so people can read it and comment on it. Find that the majority of their documents that they receive are still written in Microsoft Word. And more sort of semantic type authoring, such as this talk called authoring, is a very small proportion. So typically what happens is as a researcher, you'll write up your research in Word, you'll save it as a PDF, and you'll submit it to the publisher. And they do something like this, and they turn it into XML, which is great. This is quite expensive, it's quite slow. This is what you pay for as a subscriber to the journal, is this value add, or as an author, if you're paying for the charges yourself, you're paying for this XML, which allows this to happen. So you get a nicely formatted PDF now in 2 columns for print, and then you get the version on the web. And then you get you do get some value add here because you get the citations. So we get the link to reference number 2 and we can mouse over it and we can see what reference number 2 is referring to, and we can click on that and that will take us to the bibliography, and then we can then do another click and maybe find that paper. It's taken us a long time to get there. A typical peer review process might take between 6 months and a year. So to counter this, more and more researchers are submitting their work directly to preprint servers. So they're putting it in the public domain, right in a format that anybody can download and read and decide for themselves about how reliable this information is and whether it should be taken as part of the scholarly record or not. But the problem is that it's a backward step technologically, because what people are doing is just uploading PDF or Word documents to services like Figshare or BioArchive, and so all you've got is this Word document with no interactivity. So this is what it looks like. We download the preprint, we open it in Word, great, quite dense. There's no clickable links, the citations aren't evident, it's just Whaley 2015, you've got to search out for that information to verify it. So what if there was an alternative? What if we could take a document in any format, written in PDF, Word, XML, HTML, LaTeX, plain text, and distill it into a form that was both accessible to experts but also accessible to a lay reader? So this is the problem I've been trying to solve at Scholarly. So here's an example of what it does, is it takes a research paper in any format and it distills it into this flashcard format, where it bubbles up the main finding to the top of the screen. So here, this is an example of the previous paper, so that was the one here. There's a Word file. What it's done now is bubbled up the main finding, study results, SMEs in the creative economy sector need mentoring, and so on. It's identified entities, which we can then link through to similar documents or to definitions in Wikipedia. And it's got a nice tweet button, so the researcher can immediately make their finding public and say, tweet this, here's a tweet about my latest research. Go and share it. And these hyperlinks to Wikipedia articles now become hashtags. And then the other thing it does, using machine learning, it pulls out the main findings of the paper in these bullet point summaries, again hyperlinked, so you can get explanations of the terms, including the citations, as we shall see. So coming back to our original example, paper published on BioArchive preprint server just a few days ago, is just available as a PDF. Can we do the same thing with it here? So just going back here, we've got the discussion section here. It's very flat. I don't know if you can see that, but there's some superscript numbers that refer to references. So if you're a researcher reading this preprint, you're going to have to hunt those down manually. It'd be really great if these were clickable. So part of my mission is to make all citations hyperlinks to their original source. And not only that, but to actually summarise the citation, so you can actually fact check this paper automatically. So what the algorithm does is it highlights information in the paper that it thinks is significant, shows you the citations as hyperlinks, and then says, well, actually, what did Games Valero actually find in this study that they're citing, and there's a summary of their findings there. So you can check whether this citation is actually relevant, and is it correct? Are they actually being misquoted? Is it relevant to what the author's saying? You know, when the author says, our findings agree with Smith, 2015, is that true? You better check. It expands abbreviations, so if you don't know what ILBD says, it expands it to isolated rapid eye movement, REM sleep behaviour disorder. And similarly, AAO is age at onset. So this is useful for the lay reader, who's typically, when they're encountering a scientific research paper, they're encountering a lot of jargon. This will explain the jargon to them by expanding these abbreviations and linking through, where possible, to Wikipedia, where there'll be definition of that term and more reading that they can follow. Another example of a paper published by the University of Manchester in Nature recently. And again, we turn it into this flashcard format with the abstract where it's highlighted some important stuff in the findings, but then it's created like a shadow abstract that says, well, actually, the abstract on its own is nice, but it's very discursive. Can we break it down into bullet points to make it really, really sort of easy to digest what the key findings were? And so we can find the main finding there, which is the study has demonstrated that higher relative humidity and wind speed and lower atmospheric pressure are associated with increased pain severity in people with long-term pain conditions. It's a really interesting study, actually. It's worth reading the whole thing.
2 minutes.
Thank you very much. And again, we expand terms like OR, odds ratio, and we can link through to the Wikipedia article. So what's behind this is a suite of tools that digest text from any format into a plain text representation. But similar to what Neil was saying about having this universal underlying format, which is actually essentially plain text. It's converted to JSON, and then that JSON is rendered in this flashcard format. And then there's some machine learning going on that does things like summarization and automatic linking and instant extraction, and so on. So this provides researchers with a different way of both disseminating their information in the form of, for example, these highlights, and it makes the research more accessible to a non-expert reader. Another example here. And you can try this out yourself, app.scholarcy.com/flashcard generator. There's a few canned examples there, and you can also upload your own papers, so welcome your feedback on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So a point and a question. So my point is I absolutely love what you've done here. And if there's any way we can find you a billionaire to make this completely free, then that would be marvellous.
Or I can get WAIS.
My question is, when you generate these summaries, obviously there is a danger that sometimes that will not be accurate. Is there any process by which the authors can intervene with that summary data?
At the moment, no. I mean, they could take the summary that was generated and copy it to Word and then edit it and then, repost it in some format. It's extractive summarization, so there is, I wouldn't say strong guarantees, but it's much more likely to be factually correct because it comes from the original source. Whereas you've probably seen the summaries generated by BERT or GP2, for example, where they just hallucinate the details. It starts off being quite plausible and then it just goes on. So this is really purely extractive summarization with some language simplification, so that there should be stronger, not guarantees, but there should be strong confidence that the facts are correct there.
But we talk about the future of text literacy, and it's something I'm coming across in my own research, something we're talking about closely today, is how to do visual representations of text and sort of graphics.
Yeah.
And I wondered if that's something you've been looking at, or if that become part of your flashcard.
It's been something I've been thinking about,
Yeah.
I've been looking at. Yeah, it'd be great to have some way of turning a summary into like a graphical abstract, for example.
Yes.
About sort of showing like pictures of what experiments were done and the results and so on.
Yeah, so word cloud is kind of an obvious
Word cloud's the
example,
obvious
but
one.
it's not very sophisticated.
Yeah,
It's more
if you had like a library of images that would explain some of that stuff and then it would combine it. Yeah, I've no idea how to do that, but it would be an interesting thing to look at.
That's exactly the kind of collaboration we're hoping for people to think about. Yeah, and then
The question that scares me on your flashcards, because as someone who knows something about electronic page,
So
it appears to be very easy when you take these summaries that you miss out a certain level of understanding,
yeah.
because the way that flashcards read gives one interpretation, but the real interpretation is something very, very different. And so what scares me is people like reading the short versions,
Yeah.
is that you get embedded into the meme of society for very wrong answer. Because so if you take Wakefield, what Wakefield said at the beginning is totally different to what was pushed. Because Wakefield took a subset of the subset to come up with a particular set of criteria, and it got turned to something entirely different.
If I could just answer the first part of your question. So the summaries are presented in context, so you can expand the individual sections from which the points have been thrown to the introduction, discussion and so on. There's also a link to the original paper as well, so if it's available on the web you can see the whole paper. So yeah, taken in isolation, a summary on its own without context would have that risk, but I think by presenting it in context with the rest of the paper, the risk is maybe reduced.
Aileen?
So I think there's another area in addition to academic communication, and that is the whole social impact space, which is really chaotic because of different definitions and so on. But within the IEEE, I'm chairing a working group to do social impact measurement, and we are looking at how we can actually cite sources for different things, and actually using this would be very valuable. Today, Gates Foundation, USAID, all World Bank are all trying to work on this problem of carbon measurement towards the Sustainable Development Goals. And for the EU research in the next cycle, that's a high priority. So I think that's a place for you to potentially go to apply this.
Sounds good. We should talk more about this afterwards. Thank you.
Having used and known Phil for a while, what is amazing to me is not the summary. A lot of people do different kinds of summaries. It is the interactivity of it. So you can do the extracting, coming back, and the connecting. So it feeds a lot of the earlier discussions of the day of different views. So I just wanted to pull that together. Thank you.
Thanks.